show up. Show up. Christine Moore. It was January 28, 2012. That's a day I will never forget. I was staying in a 30-day inpatient drug rehab facility center because I had been struggling with an addiction to prescription pills for over 10 years. And it was 4 days before I was to graduate from this program and go home to my family and somehow pick up the pieces and start over. I remember being in one of my recovery support group classes that day, and I got a very urgent call. My counselor told me I needed to go down to the admission building right away. I walked down to the admission building. I noticed it was a beautiful day outside. The sun was shining, not a cloud in the sky. Very unusually warm day for January. I walk into the lobby and I smell a freshly mopped floor, and I see a sheriff standing in the walkway. He was wearing a brown uniform with a tan hat, gray beard, and soft blue eyes. He looked at me and he goes, "Are you Mrs. Moore?" I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Mrs. Moore, I'm here to serve you with divorce papers from your husband." Whew. Okay. I was shocked, but I understood what was going on. But I was not prepared for what happened next. He then served me with a restraining order, which meant I could not go home after rehab, and I could not go anywhere near my children. I just remember shaking my head. I kept asking him, how can I not go near my children? I'm their mother. I don't remember much of the conversation after that, but what I do remember is going back to the room that I was staying in and falling down on my knees next to the bed And I just remember crying out. I was like, "God, why? Why is this happening? I'm getting here, I'm trying to get help. How is it that I'm losing everything that's important to me?" Let me ask you a question. Have you ever gone through something that you were not expecting, that perhaps sideswiped you or brought you to your knees? What do you do when you experience adversity? I listed just a few examples here on the whiteboard of different adversities people go through. Example, abuse. Could be all kinds of abuse. Verbal abuse, physical abuse, child abuse, sexual abuse, drug abuse. Or maybe you didn't have the best childhood growing up. Maybe your parents never said the words, "I love you." Maybe you've been fired, laid off, found yourself dead broke, had to file for bankruptcy maybe at one point in your life. Or maybe you've gone through divorce. I could list all kinds of examples here, but what I want to do is I want to show you that you can look at this through two different sets of lenses. You can either see this as your why to versus why not to. Show up and go after your dreams and goals despite what you've been through. Now, unfortunately, I know a lot of people who will look at this and they'll say, "Look at this, Christine. This is what I've been through. Nope, this is why I can't show up. And this is certainly why I cannot succeed." Now, everything I listed here, I personally have gone through. And I look at this now. I didn't feel this way back when I was going through it. But I look at this now, and I see this why I must show up. I show up to show other people who have gone through similar situations what's possible when you just tweak the mindset just a little bit. Now, I want to share with you 3 things that can help you go from going through this to being in a place where you can show up for others. The first thing is, in my childhood, growing up, my parents never said the words, "I love you." And it wasn't until after I had my own children and I was going through my addiction and I was seeing the psychiatrist and I was telling them, my parents never said, "I love you," and I was telling them how they grew up in a home where there was just no physical touch, no words of love or affirmation. And he goes, "Well, Christine, they just don't have the capacity to love you the way you wanted to be loved because of the way they grew up. And I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But then later on that night, I went home and I started thinking about it, and I said, well, if I grew up the same way my parents grew up, no physical touch, no words of love, then why is it that I show so much love to my kids? And it wasn't until a couple of years later that somebody on Facebook, funny enough, answered that question for me. And he said, it's because you decided to evolve. That was it. I decided to evolve. And I was not going to let the cycle continue any longer. So that was number one. And number two is surrender. Now that looks different for a lot of people, but for me, basically what that means is I empty out my cup. And I decide that I know that I don't know everything. And I lay my pride, my ego aside, and I just say, okay, God, how are you going to teach me today? How am I going to show up for others and serve them? And the third thing, which is the most important, is fellowship. You have to surround yourself with those who love you unconditionally, no matter what. And this might sound crazy, but it's not always family members. You got to have those people who are you can call 2 in the morning, who just have your back and hold you accountable. So the question I asked you earlier, what do you do when you experience adversity? Well, it's okay. I'm not implying that you don't fall down. It's okay to fall down and even stay down there for a while. But what's important is when you get back up, you look at the things you've been through, and you decide, okay, this is either going to be why not to, or better yet, why to. Show up for yourself and for those around you.